Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nice Talk, the crypto show by NiceHash, where we're featuring expert commentary from around the industry. We are here a few hours after the merge today with Daniel Keller, who we had back in the spring on the show. Very happy to have you back here today and see your thoughts on what's happening in the industry. A lot of changes going on, and I'm
Well,
looking forward to hear your thoughts.
thank you for having me back, guys. Like I told you before, I guess I did all right the last time if you invited me back again. And I don't know about expert. I think I'm pretty good, but I don't know. Expert's kind of lofty.
So yeah, that's how do you feel about the merge in your opinion? Do you think it went? Did you expect it to go the way it went? Did you think it went smoothly?
I think it went
Let's start with that.
smoothly. I think it went smoothly. It's funny because people ask me about it seemed like everything just kind of came together. It was 4 years in the making. I mean, we started preparing
Uh,
for the ETH merge over 4 years ago, right? So we were down to the nitty gritty where we had to. I mean, people don't understand what goes into proof of work projects like that. You need to make sure that your infrastructure is sound. You need to make sure your pools can handle the hash. You need to make sure all the people that are, related to the project, make sure that they're all solid. You need to make sure your exchanges are on notice that there's changes. If in Flux's case, we have parallel assets in the ETH world, right? So we had to make sure that they were frozen. So in case there was a mess up on the ETH merge, it was a lot of work. But you know what? It was it's some of the most fun I've had in my life. I mean, just I mean seriously. I mean there since I've been in crypto, really this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. The number 2 biggest cryptocurrency literally just left overnight and went to proof of stake, right? And then
uh,
now all the rest of the proof of work projects are set to, you know, absorb that hash, or people will shut some of the rigs down if it's not profitable. But I think over the next several months, I think we'll see it equalize, and I think it's a really good thing.
yeah, I think it's quite early to say if everything went smoothly, it's just a couple of hours after the merge, so who knows what happens in a month or two, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, I
Well,
hope for the best, but who knows?
smoothly for us. I don't know what the hell is going to go over there with Ethereum, but it went smoothly for us. We planned appropriately, so yeah.
Yeah,
It was a lot of fun to watch it, and man, I tell you, some of the interviews that I had right before. I mean, people are just for the very first time, like they've like I had somebody interview me who was a blockchain reporter. That's their job, and they just didn't understand the importance of proof of work. And they looked at the ETH merge as well. It's a 99.9% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. It's okay, yeah,
yeah,
but you went from a completely decentralized world into a completely centralized world, owned and controlled by a few. So really it's went exactly against the grain of what we were trying to accomplish. Most technology projects will iterate up. These guys iterated backwards in my case. So, and I don't want to talk bad about Ethereum because I'm sure there's maximalists that'll hate my guts, but
yeah.
it is what it is.
Do you think they're going to run into issues down the road with this centralization? And we saw like other testnets blocks being missed, things like that. Do you think that's
I
going to
think
crop up?
we've already seen it. I mean, Infura, Consensus, J.P. Morgan, they're the big stakeholders. You got Coinbase mixed in there. They're have a massive amount of validators. I mean, it literally went from being quasi decentralized because the miners were really holding together anything that was left of a semblance of decentralization, and now they're gone. So
Mm,
now you have the powers that be, the J.P. Morgans, the Consensus, the Infuras. Infura already shut people down and locked them out. So it really it kind of smacks against everything that we've done. For in my case, 10 years to build this thing out. And now they're heading in the opposite direction. So I
yeah,
think it will be a challenge. Um, I think that you're seeing if you can't beat them, buy them, right? And I think exactly the large institutions came into Ethereum. I think that's exactly what they just hijacked the second largest cryptocurrency in the world.
basically, yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
the power shifted back to the wealthy and the powerful.
I always tell the guys they disrupted the disruptors, because we as technologists and have an appreciation for blockchain and cryptocurrency. We were the disruptors. We came in and shook the financial industry, right? We said there is another way than what you're doing it, and it's with blockchain, it's crypto, and self custody, and not worrying about toll booths and gatekeepers. We were disrupting the financial sector, and along comes they disrupted the disruptors by, we'll just take your number 2 cryptocurrency and we're going to basically turn that into FedCoin, because essentially it's what it is. I mean, it's going to be used like that. I think a lot of these exchanges that you're seeing launch too, like the just yesterday or the day before, Fidelity, they're the big players in the space are launching their own crypto exchange. What's going to be the base model for that? It's going to be Bitcoin. I mean, they'll have Bitcoin on there, but it won't be Bitcoin. They're gonna really push the Ethereum narrative.
Yeah, I mean, we can have Ethereum that's proof of stake. That just makes more room, for projects like Flux, for example, who wants to stay decentralized, which is, if they want to do it like this, then let them have it. But there are going to be other projects that will keep on decentralization and stuff like that,
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, you're already hearing the ire of, but the Biden administration coming out and saying they were, well, if we can't get you guys to, iterate your technology, then we're going to go ahead and ban proof of work. And I about spit my coffee out when he said it, because it's like, I don't really think that they understand, you know what I mean? I reached out to the Department of Energy and said, look, you guys don't get this. Projects like Flux that are proof of work are actually almost carbon neutral, in the sense that, how can a proof of work project be carbon neutral? 50% of our node network is running applications, running on demand, pieces of the platform. And then as proof of use of work moves in, the miners will be part of that as well. So, we need to do a better job. The proof of work community needs to do a better job iterating the tech, instead of creating, okay, Flux is doing that, I'm going to do that. Raven's doing that, I'm going to do that. Whatever. Ergo's doing that, I'm going to do that. Get away from that. And let's just not be tribalistic. And if we all work together to develop this platform out, proof of work as a whole, then I think we'll be successful, because then you can't make arguments that we're not iterating tech. We're not getting to, carbon neutral, carbon negative, and can still have the consensus model of proof of work that keeps us all decentralized.
Yeah, exactly. There's we're still early in the technology, basically in the proof of work. There must be something that we're not even thinking about right now, like a solution that, exactly like you were saying, if we come together and evolve it, then there's going to be something that will solve it.
Yep. And right here, proof of useful work. That's what we're shooting for. Is we've already done it with our node network. So I mean, our node network came online. The very first thing it started to do was mapping proteins for COVID-19 with folding. Right. So we ran on every single node all across the globe. We turned it up, and we started mapping proteins. Today you can deploy websites, oracles, front ends, back ends, you name it. If you can Dockerize it, you can deploy it on Flux in a decentralized manner. Now you're starting to see blockchain projects start to deploy their infrastructure. So you got Kadena, you've got, Haven, you've got Caspa, you've got all these different projects that now they're like, hey, our node network kind of rough. We need work on that. Well, that's what Flux is there for. You can deploy for pennies, front end, your infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of these projects, we're agnostic. Flux is kind of agnostic. We're a proof of work. I always tell people we're a technology company that happens to have a blockchain instead of a blockchain that's trying to build, a technology company. Well, not really company, but a community, right? So, in the end, is if we're all working for this interchain operability and we're making the best of what proof of work can be, I think we're all going to end up being in a much better place 2 or 3 years from now than where we are now. And all those arguments about greenhouse emissions and carbon footprints and everything else will dissipate, but we are the ones that will have to make it dissipate. We're going to have to get to the next level. Otherwise, we're just giving them more ammo for their their march against privacy and decentralization.
The main issue there is at the moment is that there's basically only one narrative. all the small proof of work projects are doing their own thing, promoting their own values and different ways of doing things. But there's not like a bigger narrative to why proof of work was there in the first place. What's the original point of it is. This is always missed when it comes to a bigger narrative, or then it's, yeah, like you say, it goes into the energy consumption and it's beneficial to different people instead.
Yeah, and you can't say we weren't warned. Satoshi Nakamoto, one of his biggest quandaries was what happens when you reach critical mass with the compute resources. So, we have a massive footprint with e-waste right now, mostly around ASICs. So, GPU mining, that looks a little bit different than what mining and, Bitcoin is. So there is an argument, even of centralization with ASICs, so if we want to really talk about, getting down to brass tacks, how do we get Bitcoin beyond the ASIC, and I'm sure there's people out there ready to strangle me when I say this, but, the argument has always been the more hash rate you have, the more secure your chain is. And they're not necessarily wrong, but they're not necessarily right. Because if you're iterating new technology that didn't exist, okay, so take Flux, for instance. We instituted a 51% attack, basically that you couldn't, attack the chain at maximum reorg depth was like 40 transactions. So to 51% attack Flux, you're going to need to know all the winners of the nodes. You're going to have to control 51% of the network. And by the way, why do people basically institute 51% attacks? Is they go after centralized exchanges. So if you set your confirmations higher than 40, which is our maximum reorg depth, it just stops the chain and nobody loses money to begin with. And that I'm not saying that, but that's things as people develop their project, they need to be thinking about this. And I think Bitcoin has got to such a scale that even the developers, I went to the Bitcoin conference down in Miami, and I was, just between us guys here and everybody else listening, I was not impressed. And I'll tell you why. It was they were all moon boys, and there was very little talk about infrastructure. I expected to see some devs there, some core devs. I expected to see people building out next iteration on the technology. It was the financial sector. It was the fanboys. It was people that just showed up to buy t-shirts and act cool. And that's really what's affecting us, is we fell into this lull that Bitcoin will always be the biggest and it'll always be the best. And maybe it will be, but maybe it won't be. Exactly. Maybe we need to develop the next technology. I mean, could you see proof of work being instituted on Flux and then other proof of work projects adopting that? Hell, even Bitcoin. I mean, if it was done correctly and it worked, and they could use those compute resources for the betterment of mankind, then it's a no-brainer. So I think there needs to be, and this was, when Satoshi was talking about this, I mean, he was very straightforward. He believed too that if you didn't believe with what the main chain, the Bitcoin, you fork it and you go do something else. And that's exactly what you've seen with a lot of these proof of work projects.
Yep. Speaking of forking, what do you think now ETH moved to proof of stake? There's a lot of talk about forks happening on that. Where do you see that going?
It's hard to say. Like, look, there's always going to be opportunists, right? They see an opportunity. I mean, we saw this in the hash war. I mean, you guys remember it, right? The hash Bitcoin Cash, BSV, Bitcoin BSVs or Bcash was going to flip Bitcoin. Sorry to the, Bitcoin Cash maximalists. I got to stop saying that. Bitcoin Cash, if they were going to flip it, and everybody was jumping back and forth, and and it ended up Bitcoin just walking away from it in the end. But it was exciting. It was an exciting time. And then you saw the opportunists start to come out. There was fork of a fork of a fork of a fork. And then all of a sudden, everybody would jump from project to project to project. I don't think that's going to happen this time. And I'll tell you why. I think we were a much more mature space than we were in, 2018, 2017. I think we've developed the technology pieces that kind of prevents some of those pieces. But we're still got a lot of fanboys, a lot of hype people, a lot of Wind Moon people in the space. So I feel like there will be forks. I mean, the Justin Sun Tron, the Justin Sun ETH POW. biggest scam in the world. I mean, like literally, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you guys are supporting it or not. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk shit, but it is. It's, you know, they're pre-mining a massive today while you're sitting here recording this. They're pre-mining their project out, and you know, they've already started paper trading. You know, 3 months ago. You know, it's a joke. So, and I think people are getting smarter with this. They're not chasing these, you know, false prophets that come in and say, this could be something. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, S miners out there mining, you know, crap coins, right? And that's just what they do and they like it. So I think, you know, when they deploy, I think you'll probably see some people shift over just for the first, you know, week or so, just to gamble and see whether or not that's going to be the right way to go. But I feel like, especially with the people that are mining Flux and some of these other projects, they've done their research, and it's now moved from what can pump my bags to what can I get invested in my time, my materials, my resources, my effort, and concentrate in. They have to have a use case. So we're getting to the point where just saying you're a fork of another project doesn't give you value. The value is the folks that rolled up their sleeves for 4.5 years and built something that's like actually solving a real problem in blockchain space, right? So
Ethereum proof of work doesn't. I mean, that fork doesn't solve any issues. You know,
it's nothing.
It doesn't have any usability. It's
nothing.
Yeah, it's just gamblers trying to make some money. You know, and all the users, I think they're not educated enough. Or all the people that want to try mining that, they probably just want to earn a quick buck, I guess. Or, you know, they're not there because of the project, because backing up the project.
Yep. And you know, honestly, it's something that we've saw before, right? So it was Roger Ver back in the day, you know, and, you know, he was the false prophet that came off and said, Bitcoin, you know, can't scale, big blockers, all these other things. We're going that way. So he left Bitcoin where he really could have been, you know, they called him Bitcoin Jesus. He could have been, you know, a really good evangelist of moving Bitcoin forward. But instead, what he did is he set it back by dividing it, right? And I think what you're seeing now is people are starting to catch on to this stuff. So like when Justin Sun, who's Project Tron, he should be supporting and not creating an ETH proof of work because he's got an axe to grind, because he's got his own exchange, right? So Poloniex was paper trading this thing well before anyone else. These are problems that, you know, and miners are more educated now. They're getting it, right? So if you're investing, you know, $10,000 or $20,000 in a really good mining rig, and you know you're mining an asset, you're not going to get tricked, you know.
You will,
or you will, yeah. If you chase it, it's like I always tell my kids, don't chase green candles, guys. You know what I mean? Like you're going to get wrecked. It's the same thing. Don't chase shit coins. I mean, that's just how it goes. So you know, I respect all proof of work projects except for that one, because it is a blatant grab at you know, it's going to end up screwing over retail in the long run. And another reason why people will turn their back on this ecosystem is you'll get people that are like, okay,
more hash rates for a proof of work.
Yeah. I thought ETH put a lot of, you know, black eyes on proof of work too. I mean, they basically turn their backs on miners. They turn their backs on decentralization. They, you know, God, it took forever for them to get to the next consensus model. It was kind of a joke. And now we're finally to the place where, okay, now all the really good projects have filtered to the top, and lo and behold, here comes, you know, the false prophets again. So, you know, don't chase S coins, people.
So we were talking 6 months ago. How did you guys progress since then? How did Flux? Did you make any changes? Any updates for us?
Oh man, the one thing about Flux is I always say we're the hardest working group in show business, because it is nonstop. So since we talked the last time, we've deployed you know, several more parallel assets. Ergo was one, which is a proof of work project, which just went on. We're going to have another snapshot coming up in October. So, our goal was to have our 10 assets deployed by the end of the year, and we're going to be right on that. So now you have Flux, which is the native chain. And now you have 10 other parallel assets, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, Solana, Ergo, Tron. There's a bunch of them, right? So people can live in both worlds, right? So you can be a Flux holder in, the ETH ecosystem. So if you're a DeFi degen, you know what I mean? You can go over there and you can participate in the network. And whenever you want to leave and come back to Flux, you just simply go through Fusion and you come back over.
Okay. So sorry, you were mentioning Ergo. How do you feel about these other proof of work coins and projects? Are they like competitors to you, or how do you feel? Do you want to have the hash power that they have? Like, how does Flux feel about? I mean, you guys.
Absolutely not competitors. And as a matter of fact, we've worked with damn near every one of those projects to help bolster them and make them more decentralized. For instance, we launched the Ergo Flux Parallel Asset. We not only did that, we added Ergo to Zelcore. And we not only did that, we're going to eventually add their DEX model to Zelcore. So we were working in partnership. And then Ergo decided, they do a hackathon. They said, hey, you guys want to, step up and, and help us out. So we're co-sponsoring a hackathon with the Ergo team. Cool. The Caspa team, another project that I like. They just recently, yesterday, deployed their nodes on Flux. So, the nice thing about that is they're expanding their node network. They're making themselves more decentralized, and they're working together. So the long story short is we have an excellent relationship with Kadena. We run, their chain web data. We run a lot of their pieces, node structure. We have a great relationship with Ergo. We have a great relationship with Caspa. We have, all these other proof of work projects. If we get beyond the tribalism of my bag's the best bag, and we get, and they say, look, if we all focus on proof of work holistically, right? We look at it as teams. So Ergo is not my competitor. Caspa is not my competitor, doing two entirely different things. And by the way, things that I don't want to do, right? So rapid transactions, you're looking at Caspa. I mean, they got like a 1 second block time. It's ridiculously fast. I mean, their confirmations are like, bam, like that, it's done, right? You got KDA that's doing, 20 layers, braided chain, really the version of Ethereum that should have been Ethereum is KDA. You've got Ergo that's doing kind of what Ethereum did, but focused around proof of work, their asset layer, their DEX model. We're all working together. And that's a new one for this space because, mostly it was tribalistic before. We want your hash power. We want your, no, we want to build a better proof of work model. And if we do it together as a team, then that's when you'll see success.
So it's not like when you wake up, you think first thing you think about is, do we have more hash power than Ergo or other projects?
We could give two craps. And honestly, the Ergo folks and the Caspa folks and I would say the one, even Raven to a certain extent, we've deployed Raven full nodes on Flux. We've put up block explorers, decentralized block explorers for them. They're less like the other ones because, they're, I would say, let's call them Bitcoin's little brother. Right. So for all intents and purposes, and they're like they're kind of like the odd man out. They don't want to really work with anybody else. So we'll just do it. We'll just help you out. You don't have to ask. We're just going to do it. So, we deployed nodes, we deployed explorers, we deployed their asset layer inside of Zelcore. We'll continue to keep building them out because no matter what, if we're supporting proof of work, we're all winning in the end.
What does that mean that you deploy nodes? Like you just pay the nodes and like your own nodes, your host nodes?
So basically, yeah. Okay. So let's use KDA for example, right? So KDA had a dilemma. This is a year and a half ago. They were building out. They wanted to be more decentralized. Their node network was not good because let's face it, unless you're really dedicated or incentivized, you're not going to run a node unless you're really, people run Bitcoin nodes because they want to help with the network, right? So I run a Bitcoin node too. I mean, it's just you're helping support the network.
But it's a bit hipster thing to do,
Yeah.
You can say I'm running Bitcoin node. So.
Yeah. So KDA had a dilemma. They needed more nodes to be more decentralized. And by the way, that helps them scale on the proof of work side as well. So if their node network is growing, the proof of work is becoming more decentralized. They've got more miners involved, everything. So it's just growing holistically. So what Flux did is it came in and it said, okay, let's target how many nodes do you need to run? And they did what they called a node incentivization program. So if you deployed a KDA node on Flux, right, their node, so now it's decentralized. It's running anywhere across the globe, right? You got a little KDA. And it worked out really good for a lot of people because they were in real early. And then, of course, KDA went to the moon and back again. And you know what I mean? Like it just minor things, you know what I mean? But now they said, how many nodes can we deploy? We said, let's do 100 of them. Let's deploy 100 nodes on Flux. And we did it within I want to say the better part of 2 hours. They were up and running.
And how much control do you have over these nodes? Like you as a
they're
as an organization.
They're all deployed by individuals. So
okay.
Dan wants to. Okay, so the way that it works now is if Dan wants to run a node, I either have to have hardware here or I have to deploy a VPS, right? Well, if the VPS is running on Amazon, it completely defeats the purpose of decentralization because what if Amazon comes in one day and says, you know what, this crypto thing, it's not for us. Everybody's shut off, right? And you saw a major VPS provider recently say anything related to crypto, they're taking it off their platform. Mm-hmm. So what Flux does is give you the ability to deploy on a network that's bare metal and VPS cloud provided included. So you can run a Raspberry Pi, you can run a Jetson, you can run an old computer that meets spec. You can run enterprise infrastructure servers, bare metal servers, and you can run even our Titan nodes, which is our staking nodes. You can participate in Titan nodes as well. So in the end, we went. KDA asked for 100 nodes. We gave them 1,500. So now, why is that important? Well, not long after that, somebody attacked the KDA chain, and they were doing a specific attack where it would take down a node, right? And their ultimate goal was to take down every node on the network and then stop the chain, right? So what happened is they could target and shut down the ones at AWS, right? Because they're fairly static. The problem was when they started to get to the ones that were the Flux nodes, as they would take one offline, Flux is completely redundant. It would deploy another one over here. They took another one down. We deployed another one over here. They took another one down. They deployed it over here. So they were like literally playing whack-a-mole as they were trying to, and they gave up because they were like, it's not going to work. We call that like the wetlands. Like as a project gets massive demand, Flux acts as a decentralized wetland. You need more nodes, we'll give you more nodes.
Sorry to disrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Does that mean that if I have my my node, I set up a node on Flux, does my PC get targeted by these attackers?
The chain is what really gets targeted. So they're really going after the chain. They're going after the nodes. And I can't speak of exactly what the problem was, but I know that it affected the nodes. But no, I mean, they're not going to get targeted because essentially that's the layer 2 infrastructure. I mean, most people would try to go after your layer 1, which, 51% attack you or, try to fork the chain or something like that. Whereas, the node network, I mean, I'll tell you, Flux, let's say the better part of a year ago, as we were getting into the last short strokes of really pushing out, we called it Project Jetpack, which was, massive development quickly on top of Flux. We had caught a downstream error from Bitcoin. And basically what it was doing was it wouldn't validate with the nodes, and we lost 60% of our network and we forked. So the actual proof of work piece forked, and we lost 60% of our network. Not one of our applications, not one of our websites, not one of anything went down. It stayed running. We were able to catch the fork immediately, get back on main chain, nodes updated, and we kept running. It's a stress test that I wouldn't recommend to anyone because I about hit the floor. But after the fact, I kind of sat there and smiled, and I said, dude, we just lost like 60% of our network, forked the chain, and we still stayed online. You know what I mean? So that's a testament to how we have built this thing out, and we're getting even bigger and better as we go.
Cool. That's a pretty good statement.
Very, very stressful time, but we planned for those kind of things. So it was exciting to see. People get mad because maybe they missed a block reward or something like that. This is iterative tech, man. If you wanted a daily deposit, go put it in your savings account and earn 0.1% interest. This is innovative. This is disruptive technology. If you're not breaking it, it's not tech. And trust me, we've broke a lot. You know what I mean? So we're very tech centric.
So when it comes to the tech side of things and Web3, which we talked about a little bit in the last time you were on the podcast, where do you see Bitcoin in that? Do you think that's
I think it's interesting because one of the things I picked up down at Bitcoin Miami when I was down there is there's a lot of expectations to run infrastructure around the Bitcoin network. But if you're building on, if you're building something to interact or participate in the Bitcoin network, but you're building it on AWS or you're building it on Microsoft, it really goes against the ethos of what we started out in the first place, right? You're still letting them those centralized entities kind of be the ruler of the asset. So I think what you'll see is projects like Flux that starts. We're going to deploy the Lightning Network on Flux. That's on our roadmap. So
that's about to ask you about Lightning. Yeah.
Completely decentralized, running on a decentralized network. Jack Dorsey, eat that, right? So, because, he talked about it's not, Web3 is not decentralized. It is. It completely is. And it's called Flux. The infrastructure side. Like there's two definitions to Web3. You got, metaverse and NFTs and, particular pieces of DeFi and FinTech and all these like glamorous stuff that they loop in. And then there's Flux or the decentralized compute models, right? Infrastructure. And I compare it to like we're the folks that sold the pickaxes, the shovels, the pans, the jeans to the gold miners. We got rich, right? As an ecosystem, much like they're doing it. They did. The miners were out there mining. Most miners didn't make much money, but the infrastructure that runs all of Web3 will need to be decentralized. Because if it's not, it's just legacy technology. It's Web 2, right? Yeah. So, and you see a lot of VCs coming out and they're trying to sell you a bag of, rocks essentially and tell you it's Web 3. Take 90% ownership in these companies. Dump all over retail head because there's interest in people. I mean, it's like Bitcoin in the early days. Lots of scammers, lots of false prophets. Oh, this is Web3. Go into LinkedIn one time. Everybody's profile says Web3 now. They have no clue what the hell it is, but they're in it. They're in it. They know it. They're early adopters. So, you got to kind of, it is what it is. So, you got to take the negative.
You can see Web3 developer and stuff like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What's in your eyes the best Flux real world application? Something that's run on Flux. What?
I mean, we've got a lot of stuff running on Flux now. So our first, we recently did a State of the Union and we did our projections over 5 years of where we thought we could be. We walked past year 1 and we walked past year 2, and we're actually kind of going into our year 3 numbers. So, our anticipation was to launch, let's say, 6,000 deployments, 6,000 instances, right? So website, oracles, back-end, front-end, game servers, whatever it was. Well, we're well over 20,000 now. We've and our set number, our year 2 goal was 20,000. We've already passed that. So I would say like we're blockchain by birth. So I like a lot of the projects that run from the blockchain space. So you have, Caspa nodes, you have Polkadot, Pivx, there's a blast from the past. You've got Haven, you've got Kusama, Polkadot, you name it, like those. Then there's like, we have, Minecraft, Bedrock, edition servers. So you can run a Minecraft server. We have Quake servers. We have game servers. We're partnering with a gaming company to start to deploy decentralized game servers. We can do that now because we have what's called geolocations. So when you deploy something on Flux, you can just put it anywhere and make it decentralized. Or if you need to be regulatory compliant, or you need to have low latency, low ping times, and high availability, and you want it in a specific area, you can deploy via geolocations. And that's huge, because really having a decentralized network is good and all, right? But if you really want to have people deploying on it, you need to make it fast.
And you need the good latency and
yeah, good latency. Now, maybe it doesn't matter for somebody who's running a full node, but it does matter for somebody that's running a game server, right? So I don't want to be sitting in California in the United States and my game server be in Germany. You know what I mean? Like that isn't a good experience. So what you can do with Flux now is you can specify regions. Well, we want it on the West Coast, or we want it in specifically California. You can start to kind of narrow it down and still be decentralized within that area. So
how much can you narrow it down? Like how deep does it go?
We're going to have it down to where you can get into actual regions. So, I would say all the way down to like, let's say the city level. Like, let's say hypothetically you wanted, a couple nodes in New York, you could do it. I would say most people, especially game developers, will do it by region. So they'll say West Coast, Midwest, Central. In Europe, Germany would be one, France would be one, so on and so forth. You could pick and deploy those regions. And not only can you deploy them locally, you can also deploy them out at a larger scale. So say you want a fair amount of, let's say 20 nodes running for Europe, but then you have a specific area inside of Europe that you really want to concentrate on. Say maybe you have a front end to a mining pool, and you're standing up a stratum or something like that. Then you can get real microscopic on top of that. So it's as much or as little. And if you don't want to deal with any of that, you just say, throw in my servers wherever it goes, and it'll randomly spawn them all across the world. And this is stuff that isn't like pie in the sky. Like, this isn't like a minimal viable project. You can do all these things today, and people are doing all of these things today. And it's really what has propelled Flux forward so quickly this past year, is we see a need to concentrate on decentralization. We see a need to have something that you can't deplatform, right? The next version of the internet. And I really believe that, Flux is going to be the one that's leading the way on that. I mean, we're realists. We don't, we're not fighting with other projects. We're actually working with them. Our products are all fully developed and out there, and each one of them addresses a unique problem in the ecosystem. And not only the ecosystem, we're not targeting fintech solely. We released a Paradigm white paper, which is electronic medical records on the blockchain that'll run on Flux. We've started partnering with game providers to build back ends and front ends for game servers. These are all things that are happening today. And the one thing I can tell you about Flux that I can't say about any other any other product that's in the space. One, it's blockchain by birth. Two, its focus is pure decentralization. If we can't get it in a decentralized manner, we have to build it, and that's exactly what we've done with a lot of these things. So it would make no sense to like build this nice little platform, and then we need two-factor authentication, and we use Google's two-factor authentication. Well, now we're depending on a third party. So we had to build decentralized two-factor authentication that utilizes the blockchain to validate. Well, we need to be able to identify people and their servers without giving away their identity, a pseudo-anonymous ID, right? We need a self-sovereign ID, right? So that you could have your apps and your wallet and your other pieces, but not give away the individual information about yourself. And that's why Zell ID was born. So it does exactly that. So, I mean, it hasn't been an easy haul by any stretch of the imagination. Could we have done it faster? Probably not. I mean, we've been very methodical. We care little about price. We care little about, tribalistic BS. We care about developing tech. that's what we're here for.
That actually brings us in. We collected a few questions from our audience as well. That actually brings us into one of those questions. What can we count on seeing from Flux utility over the next few years compared to other projects? What's your key utilities that you tend to implement?
Well, the one thing about Flux is we didn't flux around, right? It's all about Flux. We didn't create like another gas model that would power the network. We didn't create like another token that you had to use to deploy or anything like that. If you want to run a node, you need Flux. If you want to deploy an app, you need Flux. If you want to deploy a website, you need Flux, a game server, Flux. If you want to use Zelcore, you have to have Flux. If you want to use ZelID, you have to have Flux. Decentralized two-factor authentication, Flux, right? So you want to use API calls that are built on Flux, right? So the reason why we did this, and it's going to become more seamless even in the future, because the way that it works now is if Dan goes to run on Flux, I can walk through my steps, upload my Docker image, into the GitHub repository and hit submit, and then I settle in Flux. So it's going to cost me 0.6 Flux to deploy that website. Well, that doesn't work very good for companies, major companies that need to do a budget, right? So it could be this much, or it could be this much as the price of Flux fluctuates, right? Another fun dad joke.
Did you pick the name?
Fluctuates, they can't be required to understand, okay, I need to get this much Flux because I'm going to run this much infrastructure. So what we've done is develop Jetpack 2.0, which settles in a fiat manner as well. So basically it pegs deployments to a fiat amount, but the back layer settles completely to Flux. So, I can't tell you who we're working with, but it's a big one that's going to be able to help us do this. And what does that mean? So Dan is a businessman and I have 50 servers. I now know what my budget is for the year because I can say Flux is going to cost me, $4 a server or whatever. That's my budget. And then when I go in, I'm paying in fiat. The settlement mechanism can be Flux or any other cryptocurrency, but also is pegged to fiat. So that makes us basically, that's the last missing piece for us to be AWS on the blockchain, is to give large institutional players who want to deploy, let's say FedEx is a good one. FedEx came out like 3 weeks ago and was like, hey, we're going to get rid of all our data centers. Do you think they're just not going to have computers? No. They're going to use alternative means to deploy in a much more cost affordable process. They're not going to do it tomorrow. They're not going to do it next year. Their goal is to basically shutter those data centers and get to something like Flux. Not saying FedEx is running on Flux, but I am saying that that's a perfect candidate because they could launch their infrastructure for fractions, for pennies. And for us, it's great because, it gives us, as the chain continues to grow, as the project continues to keep growing, it just reaches critical mass. And why is that important to miners? Because really, that's who's listening to this right now. They want to understand why the hell that matters to them. Well, Amazon does, and I can't remember the exact name. I want to say it's $69 billion in revenue in AWS every year. It's absolutely astronomical.
Enormous.
Yeah, it's enormous. 60% of what Amazon does is AWS. So think about all those companies that run out and they're paying that money to AWS. Well, in Flux, the way that it's going to work is once that's paid and been settled, it's settled to the folks holding the asset, running the infrastructure, running the miners. So part of proof of use work will be to take that money that's, okay, so now I'm Dan, I own, Airbnb, and I'm going to deploy it on Flux. And I'm going to spend a lot of money because I need a lot of infrastructure, right? A portion of that goes to our treasury. A portion of that goes back to the miners and node operators. And that big number that you see, that actually trickles down to the people that supply the resources to the project. So we've cut the third party out completely.
So if I understand correctly, if I set up a node or server on Flux, portion of that goes directly to miners.
Yes, even today, especially with Titan. Yes,
that's cool. I look forward NiceHash hosting on Flux.
Hey, look, I'm dead serious when I say this, guys. Like we're willing to deploy that and give you a beta. Hey, and I'll tell you, it's not all about just like leaving what your current infrastructure is doing. You can set it up redundantly. This is an example of we just recently launched, and this is kind of a leak. They always call me Leaky Dan. We just deployed SushiSwap and Uniswap on Flux. Why is that important? Okay, well, it's a decentralized DEX, right? And if they're all running on AWS and AWS goes down, is it really decentralized? Well, now, with that being deployed, there was network issues with AWS, but on the Flux side of the world,
that's crazy.
Nice. So a lot of companies are coming in and they saying, okay, so we partnered with Lumen Technology, which is huge. 60% of all the web traffic flows through Lumen's infrastructure, right? They're massive, last mile delivery. They call it the fourth industrial revolution in last mile delivery of edge compute and so on and so forth. We partnered with them for a specific reason, right? It's because they have a footprint and they have it developed out Web 2 to a massive extent. And if we can partner with them and be their Web3 solution as companies come in and say, hey, I have to cut costs. Okay. So I still want to run on Lumen, but I want to run some of my infrastructure on Flux. It's easy to work with the people that are like-minded and want to do what you do. It's harder to work with the people that are doing the exact opposite thing, but they're starting to come forward and work with you as well. So I think what you'll see is big businesses who, and I've been in this space forever, guys. I'm an old man, right? I remember when, everything was on-prem. You had to have all of your servers on-prem. You had to have everything on-prem. If you didn't have it on-prem, then you had problems, completely centralized. Then along comes Web 2, AWS, the Microsoft Azures, and people were like, oh my God, my data is going to be on a cloud. Well, where's the cloud at? I mean, it could be anywhere. I don't have control over it. What are we going to do with it? Well, now and eventually they got comfortable with it, right? Billions of dollars comfortable with it. It's going to be the same iteration for Web3. They're going to come out and they're going to say, okay, I'll give you for instance, I was sitting in a meeting with a board of a major Fortune 200 company. And one of their senior VPs, I was about 20 minutes into the presentation. He stopped me and he said, so you're telling me that my data will be all over the world, decentralized, ran by just normal people, right? And it's just going to be floating out there. And I said, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And he goes, that's terrifying. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I've heard that before. I said, many years ago when I was pitching AWS and cloud infrastructure to the Legacy One guys, they were all terrified. And we see how that ended up. And he kind of gave me a little smirk and he says, touche. So, it's about, once people start to figure out the power of what it's doing, they fall down the rabbit hole real quick. Haven, one of our projects we work with, they came to us. They said, hey, we want to reduce our infrastructure. We'd like to deploy our website on Flux, but we're going to keep our other one running, but we want to deploy it on Flux. Okay. They deployed it on Flux. Then they come back the next couple days and they're like, hey, we want to put our Vault on Flux, right? So their storage Vault. Okay. They did that. Then they came back a little bit later and they said, hey, we're going to run our front end, back end Vault, and we're probably going to get rid of some of our Web 2 infrastructure on that as well. So in the course of 3 weeks, they became that much more decentralized. So, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of those projects that are doing that. They're, we've got projects that are blockchain by birth, and that's where we need to be.
How do you say that all expands with the mining side? So you get bigger and bigger and bigger. You deploy more and more nodes. How do you see that affecting the mining industry?
I think mining is just getting started. I mean, the nice thing about Flux is, and not a lot of people know this, so I share it as much as I can. When you go to What to Mine, you're looking at the native asset Flux and a few parallel assets. I think it's 6 that are on there now. You're actually mining with Flux. Flux is unique in the sense you're mining in the past, You're mining in the present, you're mining in the future. If you're mining today, you get mining rewards for what you've mined in the past. You get your mining rewards for what you're mining today. And you're mining the parallel assets yet to come. And I'm not talking about just the 10 that we're targeting. There could easily be 100 assets. So mining is going from a short-term, speculator's world to a long-term business plan where people say, I can now get Flux for what I've done in the past, for what I'm doing in the present, and what I will get in the future. So I think what you'll see is miners gravitate toward that and stay for a very long time because there's no reason for them to leave. They've built a business model around being miners. And, I met a kid last night who was running a Flux with his GPU. He's been doing it for years, and he had enough to start a node, right? So I think a lot of the hard knocks of proof of work and miners have gotten, like, miners just mine and they sell for Bitcoin. Miners just mine and they dump for, they cover their costs. They do this, they sell, go straight to BTC, stack sats, right? That's because there's no projects out there that are giving them use cases. And now, Flux, the Fluxes, the Ergos, the Kaspas, they're giving them use cases. With Flux, I can mine past, present, future. I can then take my rewards, roll them into nodes. So now I have a passive income model, right? And I'm still working with the network. Or I could go deploy infrastructure. Maybe I'm an IT guy, or maybe and mine my way in. We just partnered with the University of Applied Science in Geneva, Switzerland, to start developing out proof of use work for their educational institutions. Well, you could see that roll out to everywhere. The face of what mining will become looks a lot different because you're going to see institutions like educational institutions. They have, let's say in Switzerland, let's say they have 100 GPUs. Well, they're just chilling. They're not doing anything. They're just hanging out there, right? And then when somebody needs them, you have to put your name on a list and you have to go in. Maybe you need to render or do some AI or mapping or whatever it is. Well, now those GPUs that are hanging there, they can start to participate in useful work. So basically, they come online with Flux. Dan is doing a massive rendering job. Maybe I'm creating it takes a lot of compute resources to create a deep fake, but it takes even more to show that it's a deep fake, right? So I need massive amounts of hash power. So, and now I can rent that from somebody that has that infrastructure in a decentralized manner all across the world. The other area that we're concentrating on is the environment. We've got to get better with the environment. So, proof of use work will change it from just a consensus mechanism, a transactional validator, to a marketplace where people can actually take and use those compute resources to do something useful in the world. And so that's the goal of Flux. I mean, we've said it before, we'll say it again. We're not maximalists. We believe Web 2, Web 3 works together. We're not maximalists in the sense that we need to get to the next version of proof of work, but proof of work. It's not proof of stake or any other crappy developed consensus mechanism. Proof of work will always be king. It'll be king because you have to put work into it. You can't print it out of nowhere. And so that's kind of some of the things that we're really focusing in on.
I think that can really help the narrative as well going forwards. Where we mentioned earlier about, you mentioned the environment and the image people have of it. It's more about getting across the use cases of it. The more people find it useful, the more they will come to see that there's a point to it. Like you can take like washing machines. Nobody's complaining that their washing machine uses a lot of energy.
Oh, yeah.
They use gazillions more energy than Bitcoin mining or all the mining put together. It's all about how you use it.
Yeah, you know what is massively uses way more carbon and way more electric than the Bitcoin network or all proof of work projects put together? The legacy banking system. And if you don't believe me, I walk through my town, I see 30 plus banks, like literally 30 plus banks. Their carbon footprint is 10 times, if not more, that we know of, right? That we can document and put together. There's nobody out there being like, you need to shut down these places, right? You need to shut them down because they're using too much power. You only need one branch I'm in a town that has 4 branches of the same bank. Why? You know, and they're open for like, you know, from 9 to 5. They're closed. You can't, you know, half the time I can't get out there to, you know, I hate conventional banking systems, right? You know, it's like crypto is so much better. You know, you can send value in seconds rather than, oh my God, I had to take my wife out there. You know, my daughter was buying a car, so we had to get some cash out, you know, and it's like, I don't know, let's say it's like, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 or whatever for her to buy her car. That's what we had to take out. And they didn't have it. They didn't have it. Like, seriously, like my wife was blown away. They're like, well, we can give you like 3,000 now, and then you can go to our other branch and pick up the rest of it. I'm like, my wife's like, what is this? You know, like, I'm like, you don't think they carry that cash, right? You don't think that's like sitting around. No, they have this bit massive network, and you know, your money is nothing but, you know, ones and zeros, you know, it's just code. That's all it is.
They decentralize your notes.
Yeah, really. Yeah, they separate you from your fiat, I can tell you that. So yeah, I think that those are all big pieces. And I think as a community, as we start to embrace the next iteration of what proof of work will be, you still have maximalists out there that are like, you know, they'll argue the point that Bitcoin is securing the largest like financial network there is and has been. Proof. And I agree with that. But that doesn't mean you stop iterating the technology. That doesn't mean you say, this is good enough. It will never be anything different than this, you know, and maybe it's not done by Bitcoin. Maybe it's done by projects like Flux and by Ergo and by Raven and these other platforms. But these guys need to be willing to accept that at some point as well. And these guys, meaning the community, the maximalists that are out there, like, you know, defending it. All you have to do is do this. We're going to do better. We're going to try better, right? We're going to put plans together. We're going to figure out how to negate some of these carbon pieces. Maybe it's carbon credits, or maybe it's a new algorithm, or maybe it's, you know, whatever it is, right? And I think that's what will make us successful in the long run, because if we don't do it as a community, all of us together, I can damn sure tell you the government's going to do it for us. And it's going to be a lot more painful for us to go that route than it is to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
But the government should be the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? We're all, you know, instead of being, you know, bag holders, we just should all be community. Because what's the old saying, guys? You know, a rising tide lifts all ships. So if we're a rising tide as proof of work, it doesn't matter what bag you hold. It's all coming along with us. It isn't about price. It's more about the technology. So, you know, I'm excited for proof of work. I think we're in a perfect spot. I think Ethereum moving over to proof of stake fixes a lot of issues for a lot of the smaller projects. We get a lot more hash. I mean, Flux has got a lot of hash out of this deal. So, you know, we're super excited with it. Maybe not the miners for a little while, because it's going to everything's still kind of in a bear market. But long term, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions from some of our users as well.
Sure.
One of them was talking about now obviously Ethereum is gone, so there's going to be a difficulty increasing on a lot of other networks, and profitability as everyone is rushing their hash rate to different networks. How do you think that's going to play out in the future on Flux for mining profits?
I think for the next couple of weeks, I think you'll see a lot of bouncing around. You know, miners are fickle. They like to play, right? So, dude, I'm a miner by heart. That's how I got into this space. You know, so I had a fairly large mining facility at one point. And man, there was nothing that I liked more than going in and setting up a flight sheet and mining a piping hot poop coin. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, and you hammer it, right? You hit it with all your hash, and you watch the difficulty jump, and you're like, yay, this is fun. So I think they'll bounce around a little. I think that ultimately, I think we're dealing with a more educated mining community than were back in, like, say, 2018 ish. And I think a lot of the FOMO, a lot of the moon boys have gravitated toward NFTs and that side of the world, which is All right, in my book, man. Like
Release
you go do those NFTs all day. Your monkey picks or whatever it is. I'm good with that. You guys head out, but you know, we'll be over here. We'll be over here working on stuff. You know, so what I think you're saying is, you know, I think NFTs could be super valuable someday, but right now I think it's just frothiness. And I think it's taken a lot of people, the speculators, the spec miners, and people like that have left that space, migrated to more of the DeFi, degen space, and which leaves us with the technologists, which is good. So I would say the majority of these miners are very focused on profit and developing out a platform and participation. Well, I call it like evergreen participation, right? So like proof of useful work is important because you don't have to upgrade your cards every 2 years just to remain competitive. You know what I mean? You can now use them for useful work plus mine the algorithm as well, and you're now invested not only short term but long term in the project, and that's what I think is going to be that's what's going to be our major attention focus, not only Flux, but other projects as well, as retention and use case.
So yeah, speaking of hardware, we got another one from another user about this Flux partnered with NVIDIA at one point. Do you have any regrets about that partnership in terms of how NVIDIA is quite against mining and putting all the LHR cards in and getting the prices so far out? How do you feel about that?
It goes like this, guys. You know, it's easy to work with the folks that align with your ethos, right? So it's easier to work with these proof of work projects who like proof of work and they see the value of it. You start leaving the comfort of our little ecosystem and you go into the standard tech stack. Sometimes you got to work with folks you don't necessarily like, but it brings value to the project. So, you know, when we announced in the NVIDIA Inception program, people immediately thought that this would be like a windfall or a bonus for miners. It was never meant to be that. What it was meant to is get us in the door to work with them for the next iteration of proof of useful work, right? Their Jetsons, which are huge. Like that's like one of their biggest things. We now have resources to fall back and to bring those Jetsons onto the node network. So are they going to come out tomorrow with a NVIDIA Flux card? No. I think we all know where NVIDIA stands, which, by the way, makes no sense to me. If they just would embrace mining as a whole and say, hey, it's a big part of our customer base, they'd be much better off in the end, and their numbers would probably look a hell of a lot better than they do right now. But the other thing, too, is you know, Flux, for them to accept us and work with us, they really had to swallow a big pill because what we're doing with proof of useful work and evergreen technology, so, you know, digging out your 1070s and putting them back online and using it for useful work, that's not necessarily inclined for their model of, like, you know, of a rotationary cycle. Bring a card out every year or every 2 years, and then people upgrade to the next one. This goes into the bin and off you go. So I think it's been fruitful. Would I like to see them embrace miners more? Yeah. But it is what it is, man. We like being kind of the crazy uncle that shows up at the party. So you think of NVIDIA's Inception program as, like, you know, all the prim and proper tech stacks, and here comes Flux, right? What's up, guys? Yeah, let's mess this all up, right? One of the other things that we gained is we're working with 3 projects that are also in the Inception program who want to deploy on Web3. Now, they would have never found out about us, and these are big companies. They would have never been able to develop and build these things out had we not aligned appropriately and been part of that project. So, yeah, I get your angst about NVIDIA. I have the same way. They were my, you know, the bane of my existence for quite a while. But in reality, you got to work with the folks that you don't agree with. You know, it just makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting that AMD doesn't have any limitations for mining. They even have their own department for it.
Yeah, AMD is a little bit more progressive in the sense that they're a little bit more accepting. As a matter of fact, I can share this. We've talked to AMD multiple times, not necessarily about their cards, specifically around their FPGA piece. Which we're looking at for Cirrus nodes, which is off chain. So no FPGAs on the proof of work consensus model or anything like that. But we're looking at a Cirrus node, which is basically you can. Very low barrier of entry, 5 flux. You can stand up a Cirrus node and you can participate in, useful work. So, they have kind of a quandary. They have these, really kick-ass ASICs or FPGAs, not ASICs. ASICs are bad. FPGAs that are looking for a use case. Well, guess what? We got a use case for them. So, I think you could definitely, these guys are a little bit more progressive and they're willing to talk to you about things. So, and we're not under NDA. This is very, very just kind of loose conversation, but we're very interested in working with them at some point and getting those FPGAs on the Cirrus side.
You mentioned price for setting up a node. What's the price right now for all the nodes? Like there's Columbus.
Yeah, we had the last time we met, we were just getting ready to go into our node halvening, and we had 2,500 plus nodes. We have 14,500 plus nodes, right? Our halvening is now 1,000 for our Cumulus, 12,500 for our Nimbus, and 40,000 for our Stratus. So each one of those nodes does like its own thing, and so the Stratus is the high end. Workhorse, lots of specs on that bad boy, huge. Then you've got the Nimbus, which is kind of mid-tier, small business. Think of it as like a small business, infrastructure. And then you have our Cumulus nodes, which will eventually be our storage nodes, right? So, we're going to need lots of storage, and that will be the node class that more than likely runs, lots of hard drive space.
Okay. Do you plan to lower the barrier of entry?
Well, we'll have another halvening. It's gonna, this isn't like, set it and forget it. Right now we have scale to about 1.2 million unique instances that you can deploy on Flux. To put that in perspective, DigitalOcean, well, they're like in the 900,000 area where they have, website deployments. So it gives us scale to really be like one of the big boys. If we get to the point where we're sitting halfway at, maybe 500,000 deployments, and we're like, what, now's the time to have, we'll go out, we'll have it again. And, we'll basically, everybody that is running a node, now it goes from 1,000 flux, maybe down to 500 flux, and they stand up 2 nodes.
But that's still quite high, like entry fee. Why does it have to be so high? I mean, I guess there would be many more people joining, setting up the nodes,
It's funny because folks like us often say that that's high, but we'll easily spend $30,000 on a mining rig and never blink an eye, right? Yeah. So if you got to think of it that way, if you're investing in the asset, it's your asset forever, right? You've taken a stake in Flux, and deploying a node is just like capital deployment you would do with mining farms or a mining rig. Hell, mining rigs, a good mining rig is like, I don't know. I looked down the other day, it was like $25,000 for everything. And I was like, if you bought it out and somebody built it for you. Now, if you build it yourself, it'd get a little bit cheaper. But think about that in the grand scheme of things. Spending $1,000, in this case today, like $1,000 to build out, a Cumulus node that you'll get, perpetual passive income from, and you'll be able to add additional storage space. So now, like when you reach certain tiers with your storage, you're going to get more flux on top of that. So, I kind of compare it to this. If you're a miner, you went out, you bought 6 cards to build a rig, and you got it running. And then you're like sitting on the couch one night and you're like, maybe I need another rig, but I'll only put 2 cards in that rig. So I'll have these over here, and then I'll have 2 more. I'm going to put these on this, and I'm going to put this on this, right? And then, 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, there's a sale at Newegg. I'm going to buy 3 more cards, right? So you have to think of the node infrastructure somewhat similar to that. Delayed return on investment. it's less risky than mining because you're outputting the money out of your pocket to buy your mining rig in hopes that that delayed ROI will come down the road. I mined Flux at 2 cents. Flux is now $1. I made a bunch of money if I held it correctly, right? It's a lot less risk with a node because you've bought Flux, you've tuned up the infrastructure. If tomorrow Flux goes parabolic and is, whatever price, and you want to take that out and take profit, you can do that. With a rig, you got to wait till that thing ROIs itself. Could be 6 months, could be never. We don't know. So, this is a lot less risky, and it's a lot more available for people that don't have the ability to run rigs in their home, or, and it allows people. The other thing is we have our Titan nodes. So Titan nodes are basically shared nodes on chain. So Dan wants to put some money in, Marco wants to put some money in, Joe wants to put some money in, so on and so forth, right? We're all putting a little bit of Flux in, and then that stands up one node, okay? 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year lockups on those, right? You get a reasonable rate of return for your lockups. You don't have to do nothing other than just show up and bring a little Flux with you. So we're trying to make that barrier of entry super, super easy. And
what's the return rate for running a node?
I don't know off the top of my head. You'd have to check out the dashboard. And I paid like literally zero attention to any of that because like I always tell people, they're like, what do you think Flux will be? And I'm like, I don't even care. I don't, price doesn't matter to me. It's all about getting it to the next iteration. So, But I would say check it out. You can go to our dashboard. If you go to runonflux.io, you can click on deploy a node, and you go into our marketplace, and you'll see the Titan nodes in there, and it'll show you the rate of return and how much you need for lockup. We deployed this as beta, and we sold out in the course of like 3 days. And every time we turn up a new node, it fills up immediately. Because it's super easy, and and not only that, it's staking with a purpose. Because staking on an exchange is just letting the exchange make money on what you've already put there. Putting an on-chain staking mechanism with Flux, you're actually tuning up a node and you're participating in the network and you're helping us grow. Well, that's night and day, So and that's a big deal.
Fair enough. We have another last question from our users. Are you expecting? We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but are you? How do you plan to grow the community? So you got your Flux, the mining, you got the node infrastructure, but although you say you don't care about the price and about the coin itself, getting that listed into as much places as possible, getting as many people using it as possible, surely that's going to boost your network and your awareness and get more people involved in the project. Mm-hmm. So how do you go about that for the future?
Well, asterisk, I don't care about the price. I care about the adoption, right? Mm-hmm. So there's two big different things here. I care about the utility of the asset, right? Because that's what gives us an advantage over everyone else, is because you need Flux for everything. The way that you grow your network is, you guys, we've been talking about different projects out there, all of us as miners, we know what the projects are, right? We know the Ravens, the Ergos, the Fluxes, the Neoxa, the Caspa, the different projects out there that are doing proof of work. Our goal is to go directly to those communities as well, and their community vicariously becomes our community, and our community becomes their community. So I think we're finally to a point in proof of work, at least I feel like we're getting there, to where the natural organic growth of proof of work will come through multiple channels. Like I said, that tide lifting all boats. So, like with the Ergo, we added Ergo as a parallel asset. So all the folks who were on the Ergo side of the world, they didn't know what Flux was. Now they do. Right. And all the people that were on the Flux side of the world, they didn't know what Ergo was. And now they do. Now those two communities, they came together, and now they're working as one community. Right. So now you got the Ergo and the Flux community. Now you add KDA into that. KDA, Flux, Ergo community, all working together. Put Caspa in that, all working together. So I think you have two ways of adoption. You have by natural organic growth, which is exactly what we're doing, and we're working with other projects to organically grow together. And then I think there's necessity. I still believe that we're at a point where there will be a massive deplatforming. There will be a major event. I mean, we already saw a sitting U.S. president taken off Twitter. And there's going to be a need for an uncensorable platform. And Flux is going to be the one that's there waiting. I mean, we've built this thing exactly for that. You know, and it's not about like, you know, we're cypherpunks at heart. We all believe in, you know, privacy and freedom and, you know, your own security, being your own, you know, custodian, so on and so forth. But we also have to understand too, everything's iterative in this space. So we have to crawl before we run. And we realize that for us to bring new people to the space, they have to feel comfortable with migrating to the space. And the only way you do that is what happened when, you know, on-prem moved to Web 2. And that was you have to be able to have both pieces in play. So I still, there's still on-prem in the world, right? There's still people that run their own server or their own servers, right? Their own data centers, data lakes. But they use AWS, so they have their foot in both worlds. We need to be the third option to that. So if you want full control and you don't want it to go anywhere, it's on-prem. If you want affordability and scalability, then it's on-prem and Web 2. And you get to a third option, you need, you know, on-prem, you control it, Web 2, you know, quick, scalable, expensive, Web 3, decentralized and cheap, right? So I think that that's how we approach it is I think there'll just be a natural gravitation. The other piece is the fact that we've acknowledged that we need to basically peg that onboarding model to fiat so that people can budget and like businesses can really use the platform. That's like paramount. So I think in the end, I think that adoption will be, I think it'll be the first one. And I think that's through organic development and growth. And I hope that we get there before we need the second one, which is adoption by necessity.
Yeah. Great. I think we've covered all the questions from our users today. I'd just like to say I think that's really great to catch up with you again on the 6 months later from our previous talk and see how it's grown and how many more nodes and everything is really boosting on the Flux network.
Well, I appreciate you guys kick butt. I love your show. I listen to it quite frequently. One thing I want to say is that you know how to get a hold of me. Let's get those nodes on Flux. All right. just saying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, guys.
We should also have a talk on proof of work and see how we can bring broader awareness to the community, also for our listeners who are listening to the show today. If you're a miner and you're mining, proof of work is something that we need to get out more information to people about it, more education about it. We have Marco here with us today, who's always writing great blogs on NiceHash website. Make sure you check them out. NiceHash, subscribe to our newsletter. And for any miners who are mining with us, we just had the merge. Make sure that you update your mining software to the very latest to make sure you can keep on mining. This is very important. All the information is on our website. And you can also read more about Flux. You can follow Daniel on Twitter and check out runonflux.io as well. And thanks all for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.